Florida, 2013. The kind of fender bender that happens 1,000 times a day. Her airbag deploys, but instead of cushioning the impact, the inflator ruptures. A metal shard the size of a credit card tears through the fabric and slices into her neck. She survives. She loses sight in one eye. And here is what investigators would later confirm. Takata had known for years that its airbags could explode. Not deploy. Explode. Inside the device designed to save her was a chemical, ammonium nitrate, the same compound used in fertilizer bombs. And Takata had been warned about it internally as far back as the year 2000. At least 27 people lost their lives. Over 400 were injured metal fragments in faces, in necks, in chests. The device designed to save them became the weapon, and the scale of what happened next is almost impossible to comprehend. 100 million inflators recalled, 19 automakers, 12 countries, cars built between 2002 and 2015, all carrying the same ticking component behind the steering wheel. The largest automotive safety recall in human history. And that raises a question this story forces you to confront. How does a company whose name is stamped on the one device every driver trusts with their life get to the point where its product becomes more dangerous than the crash itself? To understand that, you have to understand what Takata was. Founded in 1933 in Japan as a textile manufacturer. During World War II, it produced parachutes for the Imperial Japanese Army. After the war, it pivoted seatbelts, steering wheels, airbags. By the 1990s, when airbags became mandatory in the United States and then globally, demand exploded. Takata was positioned to capture it. By the early 2000s, the company supplied roughly 20% of the world's airbag inflators. Honda, Toyota, Ford, BMW, General Motors, Nissan, Mazda, Subaru, Chrysler, Acura, Lexus, Dodge. When one supplier dominates globally, a defect does not stay in one vehicle. It spreads across every brand that uses the component. Across every country those brands sell in. By 2013, Takata had built an empire. 12,000 employees, 56 plants across 20 countries, annual revenue exceeding 600 billion yen, a family dynasty now in its third generation. The Takata family controlled everything, and at the center of that empire was a single chemical decision. Here is the chemistry. An airbag inflator works by triggering a controlled explosion. A propellant burns, generating gas that fills the bag in roughly 30 milliseconds faster than the blink of an eye. The key word is controlled. Takata chose ammonium nitrate as its propellant. It was cheap, it was effective, and it had a weakness that would unravel everything. Ammonium nitrate is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air. When exposed to heat and humidity repeatedly, over years, the chemical structure changes. The pellets degrade. They develop microscopic cracks, and those cracks dramatically increase the burn rate during deployment. Instead of controlled inflation, you get explosive rupture. The metal canister shatters. Fragments shoot outward at hundreds of miles per hour. Your airbag just became a fragmentation device. Not metaphorically, literally. The alternative, a compound called PSAN, was more stable, less sensitive to moisture, less prone to degradation, but it cost slightly more per unit. Takata chose the cheaper path, and Takata knew. Internal testing, as early as 2000 and 2001, flagged inflator instability. Engineers raised concerns about moisture exposure, thermal cycling, and long-term degradation. A 2004 test at a Takata facility in Moses Lake, Washington, triggered red flags about propellant integrity. Internally, the problem was documented and visible. What happened next, according to federal investigators, and a 2017 wire fraud guilty plea, was systematic. Takata allegedly manipulated testing data, altered records, produced misleading reports for automakers, quality control failures across multiple facilities in Japan, in Mexico, in the United States were buried instead of escalated. Honda issued the first US recalls in 2008-06 models, high humidity states. At the time, automakers believed the problem was regional, limited, a few bad batches, a specific inflator generation. They were wrong. By 2010, the pattern of rupture incidents was growing, but the full picture would not emerge for another 4 years. And in those 4 years, people kept driving, And airbags kept rupturing. Stephanie Erdman was not the only one. Gurjeet Rathore, 33 years old, November 2009. Her Honda Accord was involved in a low-speed collision. The airbag ruptured. Metal fragments penetrated her chest. She did not survive. Carlos Solis, 2014. Another low-speed crash. Another ruptured inflator. He did not survive. Joel Knight, 2015, South Carolina. His 2006 Ford Ranger struck a cow on a rural road. A survivable collision. The airbag deployed and exploded. Metal fragments struck his neck. These were survivable impacts, the type of collisions people walk away from. But the airbag itself caused the tragedy. 11 of the confirmed fatalities occurred in Honda vehicles. The automaker that was Takata's largest customer became the site of its greatest damage. The confirmed toll reached 27. Hundreds more were injured, and every name represented the same calculation. A defect Takata knew about, and a component people trusted with their lives left unrepaired. By 2014, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration launched a formal investigation. The following year, the U.S. government declared the Takata recall a national emergency, the largest and most complex consumer product recall in American history. Congressional hearings followed. Internal Takata documents surfaced under subpoena. The picture that emerged spanned 15 years internal memos dating to the early 2000s, altered test reports from multiple facilities, communication gaps between the supplier and nearly every automaker that used its inflators. One internal email disclosed during the investigation showed engineers in Japan discussing propellant instability years before the first public recall. It was not just the defect, it was the delay. Over a decade of incomplete understanding, while millions of people drove cars with unstable inflators behind their steering wheels. In 2017, Takata pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud charges in the United States, the first time a Japanese corporation had entered a guilty plea in a U.S. criminal case. The penalty, $1 billion, $25 million in criminal fines, $125 million in restitution for victims, $850 million to compensate automakers. 3 Takata executives were indicted on criminal charges. The Takata family, which had controlled Takata for 3 generations across more than 80 years, lost the company entirely. Takata filed for bankruptcy in June 2017. Its remaining assets were sold to a Chinese-owned competitor for $1.6 billion. The Takata name, once synonymous with safety, was erased from the automotive industry, and as of 2025, millions of recalled Takata inflators remain unrepaired on roads worldwide. So let us return to that question. How does a company that dominates automotive safety get to the point where its product becomes more dangerous than the crash itself? The answer is not one bad decision. It is a chain: supplier dependence, cost pressure, testing failures, information distortion, regulatory delay, global manufacturing complexity. Every layer amplified the next. Every delay converted a known problem into a catastrophe. But at the center of that chain is a number, less than half a cent. That is the cost difference per inflator between ammonium nitrate and the more stable alternative PSAN. Less than half a cent, multiplied across 100 million units, saved the company roughly $500,000. $500,000. 27 lives. 400 injured bodies. The largest recall in automotive history. This was not a manufacturing error. This was not one bad batch. This was a calculation made in a boardroom, justified on a spreadsheet, and hidden for 15 years. At Underworld, we investigate the scandals the automotive industry paid billions to bury, the recall that becomes the crime scene, the corporate decision that becomes the cause of tragedy, the number that should never have been run. If that is the kind of story you want to hear, subscribe. There is more coming, a lot more. The next one is already in production. You don't want to miss it.